Now this is Anthony Twyman's house. This is James's brother. This is what his house looked like. Now this is a view of his house from where the slave quarters would have sat. Now this is a typical slave quarters. This is not of the 37. This is actually Booker T. Washington's birthplace. But if you'll notice, dirt floors, just a small chimney there, and no beds whatsoever. So they just simply slept in the dirt. This is also Anthony Twyman's house, and this small building here is most likely built by the 37. It wouldn't have been outside the scope of possibility, and very probable that if there was a building being built, that he would have just loaned his slaves to his brother, just like somebody today may loan a shovel to their next door neighbor. This is some of the Burlington 37. This picture was taken in 1909, so 60 years after they were freed and came here. This is right across the street from Walmart, right across 52 from Walmart. Some of you may have noticed there was, there for a while, people were hanging commodes and stuff from this very cliff there for a while. But this is a picture of some of them. This is Thomas Walker Fry. Thomas Walker Fry was the foreman of the plantation. He was a broom maker. He was a doctor. He became a very well-known preacher at the time. Started several churches. Matter of fact, he was the first pastor at the First Baptist Church in Burlington. Also, he started another church in Proctorville and some in Gallion County. This one here is Mount Pisgah. Now up here you'll see Madison County, Virginia has a Mount Pisgah Baptist Church. And then also there's one in Proctorville, which was at the time known as Quaker's Bottom. Once again, it was a stop on the Underground Railroad, and here again we have a reference to the Quakers that lived and settled in Proctorville. This is land that the 37 owned when they came here. Here is Burlington, and as you're moving down on 52, before you get to the elementary school, which would be right around in this area, this is all land owned by them. And out back and up here you see Macedonia Church. The land for Macedonia Church was actually deeded to them by a guy by the last name of Davidson. A lot of these people's these names you're going to recognize and stuff like that. They may have been your ancestors. Let me throw this in. As you're coming down Old 52 headed towards Chesapeake here, you'll notice on the left-hand side you'll see two street signs. One of them is named Charlotte, and the other one is named Virginia. Now those two street signs are actually named and reminders of the 37. Charlotte was also one of the 37 and was the wife of Thomas Walker Fry that I just told you about. Virginia refers to the place where they came from. So there's evidence of the Underground Railroad in this history today. And you'll also notice over here this star, and that's the land of Dr. Camillus Hall, who was one of the first postmasters in Burlington. One of the things that I found interesting is it seems like all of these people were right along the river. And why would you think that might be? Well, you're able to look out, you're able to see who's coming, you're able to prepare. You can see slave catchers coming, you can see freedom seekers crossing the river, be able to offer them assistance, and you're able to prepare. You're able to prepare boats and things like that, so you're on the very front line. So property right along the river was very important. I haven't found really a whole lot of specific evidence linking the 37 to the Underground Railroad, but look at where they bought land. It butts right up against the river right here. I don't think that was by accident. Obviously, someone's crossing the river seeking freedom. You're making a split-second decision on whom you can trust and whom you can't. A black man coming across the river sees another black man playing the odds. It's more likely that I can trust him than a white person. Now this is Burlington, Macedonia, or this is Macedonia Church. Some of y'all may have passed it. Unfortunately, as you'll see in this picture here, it's a common target for vandals who like to spray paint it. And a lot of these windows have been knocked out. Anyway, the church was a religious and focal point of the black community and became the mother church of approximately 8 Baptist churches in Ohio and West Virginia. So a lot of the black churches that we have here in the tri-state all formed from this church right here. This is actually, from what I can tell, it appears to be the 3rd location of this church. The first one, which was built about 100 yards from here, was made of sticks. The second one was made of batten board, which is the third one, which is the same type of wood that barns are made out of. Being poor and that kind of thing, use whatever lumber they can get their hands on to build the church. And the third one, or what I suspect to be the third one, is this one here. And it's rumored that the wood from this church was donated by Eli Thayer, who was the founder of Cerrito. Cerrito was a experiment in abolitionism. Incidentally, the bell to this church was brought here in 1894 by a guy by the last name of Mayo. Once again, seems like OJ's family had quite a bit to do with our local history here. This is the inside of the church, just as it appears today, and it's all original, including the pressed tin ceiling. You'll see the stoves and stuff. And this divider here right down the middle. I think that's kind of funny, a little story behind that. Actually, women were forced to sit on the left, men sat on the right, and the reason they put up the little divider between it is so that the men, as they were sitting in church, wouldn't be tempted to look up the skirts of the women who were sitting on the other side of the room. So it actually helps to keep their attention. I guess even in church, men can't be trusted. Anybody recognize this guy? John Legend. Now, what does the singer John Legend have to do with Burlington? Well, you'll soon find out. Come, from what I've been told, March 25th, there'll be a documentary on John Legend appearing on PBS. I was fortunate enough to help them work on that documentary. You'll find it on Finding Your Roots. In that, you'll see some filming of the documentary here at the church, and you'll also notice this guy standing here is the same guy sitting right down here, Jim. Anyway, he was a member of the Polly family, and their family comes back here to Burlington. Now, on December 20th, 1860, on Tuesday of last, U.S. Deputy Rodamore of Ironton arrested a young man and woman, brother and sister, fugitive slaves from Floyd County, Kentucky. The fugitives were under the guidance of Jim Ditcher, a free mulatto who has lived about Ironton for several years. And as they were about to get on the cars at the Washington Switch at the Scioto and Hocking Valley Railroad, Rodamore was on board with the owner of the fugitives, laid hands on them, and took them back to Kentucky. Jim Ditcher made his escape at about 2:40 time and has not been heard of hereabouts. Now, the mother of these fugitives left with them and remains in the county. She was too old for him to take back. In other words, this human being had no value. So she kept her freedom. The attorney at the time was a guy by the name of Ralph Leet. He represented them in what was the longest active slave case in the United States. Jim down here has been researching that slave case, which involves his family, and has now procured the documents, the original manuscripts from that, and is trying to transcribe them now. But they were helped by a guy by the name of Jim Ditcher, who was the Red Fox of the Underground Railroad. Red Fox, no relation to Fred Sanford. But he was a tall and thin and had a type of Indian complexion. Gabe Johnson, one of the conductors from Burlington, said Jim Ditcher had seen him personally take more chances with his life than any man he had ever seen. And he had known him to have a pistol in each ear. There was an incident where they were actually trying to help some slaves to freedom, and they were being chased. They had got some horses from a preacher down in Ironton by the name of Joseph Chester, and took the horses and were taking them out back to Poke Patch. Well, they got stopped, and they were making their way there. The slave hunters actually stopped at a bar, at a saloon, and ended up getting dead drunk, which allowed Jim Ditcher to get away. Funny thing is, some of the research that I found shows that Gabe Johnson, who was another conductor on the Underground Railroad, was also a saloon keeper. So it's very possible that he led him by this bar. Gabe Johnson goes out, offers him a few free drinks and that sort of thing, knowing that he has an ulterior motive, but it gets these guys so drunk that they can't chase the people that they're looking for. Now here's John, as I said, here's John Legend, and this is Peyton Polly Jr. This is the ancestor of John Legend. This is one of the ones that were just referred to. The documentary that PBS is doing will actually go into greater detail than what I am here today. This is also some of the current Polly family. They were out exploring their roots a little bit before the PBS came along and decided to do this. And this is Teresa Polly, who's ringing the bell. It's a bell of freedom. You can explore what the sound of freedom is today. The bell at Macedonia, as I said, was brought there and would have been something that they would have heard at the time. It's just, to me, it's just staggering to think of what these people would have thought and how they would have felt attending church services at that time. Well, this is the Polly Family Cemetery, which is just out a little bit past the church, probably about a mile out. It sits on the side of a hill. And just before you get to the church, over on this side over here, there's actually a kind of a roundhouse that sits there. So if you've been out Macedonia Road, you've probably passed this cemetery. And this is where the Pollys are buried. Now, as you're getting to freedom, they actually connected. The justices are part of the 37 that I was mentioning before. And they both arrived here about 1849, the Pollys and the Justice family. When you were freed, a lot of times it was common for them to keep the last name of their slave owner. Also very common to choose a new name. And the reason I chose to show you all this one is I see that this lady chose the last name Christmas. Can you think of a better last name to have?